This is part 2 of our DIY build of a DX Commander clone. If you haven't already seen part 1, I would recommend you go back and see that now. There will be a link in the description, and there may be a link up here in one of these corners. It's important to see part 1 first, I believe, and then watch all the different parts in the proper sequence. I think it'll make more sense for you. Stay with us here to the end. We're going to get through part 2 of this build. It's a kind of a lengthy build, so I've split it into multiple parts to make it easier to watch. Hope you learned something from it. Hope you'll decide to build one yourself. This is a fantastic little antenna from what I've seen so far. So stay with us. Okay, we've got 3 identical spacers, and I have yet to determine what the size of the center hole should be. They will all 3 be different sizes because the mast is tapered as it goes up. The lowest one will be a larger diameter hole here than the upper one, and I've got to measure those and then cut the holes. So we'll see how that goes, because I have some hole saws, but I don't have that many. I know I won't have the exact size that I need, so I'll probably have to drill a smaller hole. I've got some round files. I should be able to round it out enough to where it will fit. It can be a tight fit. You don't want it a loose fit, even though I'm going to have the clamps underneath it. Still, it's going to be, I need to get it as tight a fit as I can. So I'm going to extend the pole, and since it's, I don't know exactly how long the pole is. I think it's 10 meters, but I need to extend it fully, measure it, and see where the joints are, and see where the best places to put the clamps for the guys and the standoffs are going to be. So I'll do that and get back with you here in just a minute. Unfortunately, I lost some important video while I was building the antenna, and that's on how I determined the size of the holes for the standoffs or the spacers. For some reason, that file got corrupted, only that one file. And so I'm going to try to recreate it, simulate it with this PVC pipe. And if you can imagine here, this is the larger of the 2 pieces. Okay, so this is coming up from the base, and the other piece fits into it. Okay, so that's how it looks. So this is towards the base of the antenna, this is towards the top of the antenna, and this diameter is smaller. And how I measured it was using a caliper. You don't have to have a caliper to do this, but I'm going to show you how I did it. So just turned on the caliper, and I measured right above the joint where the 2 pieces go together. And that told me the diameter that I needed for the hole, because I wanted the hole big enough to where the piece can slide down over the top, but stop when it gets to the joint. And you say, well, how can I measure that if I don't have a caliper or anything like this? Well, you can use just a regular measure. What you would do is you would collapse this section down into the base section, okay? And then the smaller sections would collapse down into this one. So you want it collapsed down, and then you can take and measure across the width of the section right here. You know, all the other sections would be collapsed down into here. You'd have it just barely pulled out of the base section, the section you want to measure. And you just measure across the diameter like that. And so you don't have to have a caliper to do it, but these are relatively inexpensive, and they come in handy for measuring lots of things. You can get them on eBay or Amazon. I'll have a link to one on Amazon if you want one, if you don't already have one. But they're good for precision measurements. And I use mine all the time for many different projects. But, you know, $15 or $20, you can get a decent digital caliper like this one. For hobbyists, these work fine. You know, just measure across the outer diameter like that, and that's the size hole that you need. Now, how did I make my holes? Well, you see here, I've got a selection of tapered bits, even up to a big one here. This goes up to 1.36 inches. So it's still not big enough to make the hole, but I happen to have a hole saw. These, you can buy them in kits, and these are not, you know, specifically made to cut plastic, but they'll cut wood, they'll cut plastic, they'll cut metals. They're very handy. I know I may have an advantage because I've had these for other projects in the past. You know, if you're building this from scratch, you may have to do it another way. And another way, I've used a saw. You know, cut like I did for the aluminum, cut a small hole, or as big a hole as you can make with this. Draw you a hole on a piece of plastic of the diameter that you want. Drill a hole in the center of it, and then use your jigsaw to cut inside the line that you drew. And then you may need to take a file or some sandpaper. Sandpaper will work on this plastic. You know, once you get it close, just stick the sandpaper in the hole, sand it down, and you should be good. It may take you a few minutes longer to use the sandpaper to get it smoothed out to the size that you need, but as long as you get it to the right size, you're not going to remember that extra 5 minutes later on. Use what you've got. You know, I've been blessed. I've accumulated these things over years. You know, this is not artificial gray hair. I didn't get all this stuff at once. And I realize that some of you are starting out and you may not have it, but tools are an investment. And I've saved myself tons of money over the years by having tools. You know, I may have bought a tool for one specific job, but I've used it for many other jobs over and over and over. So that tool has paid for itself more than once. So tools are an investment. You don't have to buy them all at once. You know, if you have to buy something, buy it for that project. You know, it may not pay for it on that project, but you're going to continue to use it over the years. And that's what I've learned from my experience. And that's how I've gotten most of these things that you see here, is I didn't buy this stuff all at once. You know, these are cheap. I picked these up down at Harbor Freight. They're not the highest quality, but for the hobbyist, they're going to get the job done 99% of the time. And so if you haven't got the tools, make do with what you've got. You use your jigsaw. It doesn't have to even be an electric jigsaw. You can use a hand saw. There's more than one way to do this. As I said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Use what you've got. As I like to say, you know, when you're cutting holes into plastic or whatever, and you don't have the exact diameter that you need, what I call is sneak up on it. Get it close but undersized. And then you can polish it out, sand it out, rough it out with a file. There's lots of different ways to do this. Be creative. Think about what you do have and utilize what you do have in order to make the part. And I think you'll see after a while that it's not as difficult as you might make it out in your mind. You don't have to have a specific tool to do something. Make use of what you've got. Hopefully this helps Sorry for the technical problem where the file got corrupted, but hopefully this will help explain how I made the holes in the plastic. Let's get back to the main video. Well, it took a little doing, but we got it done. Between this hole saw that I already had, and this is a 1.5-inch hole saw, and a step drill bit that I had, I was able to make the holes that will fit at the 9-foot level, the 18-foot level, and the 27-foot level. These are the 3 points where I decided to put the spacers and the guy lines. And this is right at where the joints are for the different sections of the pole, and it just worked out that way for 9, 18, and 27 feet. And I think that'll work fine. I've also made up some clips or clamps using heat shrink tubing to protect the pole and help it grip it as well for those different heights. Now we just need to label the different spacers here as to what band element is going through each of the holes. Now the 3 larger holes that you see on each of them is where the guy wires go. We'll orient these where they're the same. I'm going to start numbering them. That way we can keep, it's easier to keep up with when you're threading the elements through the spacers. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and see that. Then we'll start making up the elements, the driven elements for the DX Commander clone. So stick with us, we'll be right back. Okay, we've got our pole laid out here in between 2 sawhorses. Got the base plates on, they're ready to go, and got the spacers made, drilled, and marked where the different band elements are going to be. All 3 spacers are marked the same way to make it easier to thread the elements when we're ready to put them in. I've got the clamps made up, and we're going to mount this first one, show you how that is done. It's a really easy job, and let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay, going to take the clamp. The clamp needs to go on first, and then the standoff right behind it, the spacer. And we'll bring that down to the 9-foot joint where I decided to put it here. Got my clamp just a little too tight. Back it off a little bit. And I'll put the clamp right here above the joint. It doesn't have to be super tight, just screwdriver handle tight, and don't really have to torque down on it. And then the standoff spacer just goes in right behind it, like so. So that's all there is to it. It's not hard at all. And we'll do the other 2 spacers the same way. We've got the one for 18 feet and the one for 27 feet. So we'll put the clamp on, and then the spacer, run it down to the 18-foot level. and do the same thing, and that should be right here. And just tighten that down. Just snug it up. The clamp here it serves two purposes. One, it keeps the joint from collapsing, and the second purpose is it holds the standoff or the spacer in place, keeps it from sliding down. So let's go ahead and do the third one here, and we'll be through with the spacers. This one goes at 27-foot level right here, and it's smaller. It takes a smaller socket. Have to swap that out and just snug it down a little bit, and we're done. And here at the 27-foot level, we've got it in position now, and we're done with that. So now we just need to go make up our radiating elements, and hopefully I've got enough wire for that. I want to get this in position if I can, and at least get it guyed off at the lowest level today. I don't know if I've got enough paracord for that, so this is very much development on the fly, using most of the things that I already had on hand, and I did have to order a few things and waiting on those to come in. So let's get to making the elements. Okay, we're going to start making up some driven elements here. And let me take off my glasses, get the glare off, because I can see better close without them anyway. We're going to measure them out based on what Callum lists for the classic antenna. With one exception, we're going to make a 15-meter, dedicated 15-meter element also. So hopefully this will work out. I am going to leave them a couple of inches long, since this is not the exact same combination that Callum uses of band coverage. So I'm going to leave them a little bit long, just a couple of inches, and we'll see how that works out. If the frequencies are short, we'll find out that it wasn't necessary, and I'll have to trim it back some. We'll start with the 40-meter element, since it's the longest, and we need 36 feet 7 inches. 36 feet 7 inches. Now this table here is 5 feet long, and I'm going to be using that for my majority of my measurements, and then I'll have to use a tape measure to get down to the last few inches. But we're going to measure this on the table. Think if I can hold on to the wire that's fighting me. This is 14 gauge THHN, and like with my other antennas, why am I using this? It's because that's what I have. There's 10. There's 15. There's 20. $25. $30. And there's 35. And we need 36. So I got a foot marked out here. There's 36. And we need 7 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and make that 37 feet. And I know that's a little long, but it's easier to trim off than it is to add on. You can add on too, and we'll see if we have to do that or not. I'm going to use these ring terminals instead of the fork terminals. Why? It's because it's what I've got, and these fit over those bolts very well, so it's no big deal to me to use a ring terminal instead of the fork terminal. Cut off a little of the wire here, the insulation here. Put that in the ring terminal and crimp it down. Okay, I am going to solder. I'm also going to put heat shrink tubing on here. I think I'm going to cut off this yellow. Probably should have done that before I put the wire in it. That's going to get in the way of the heat shrink, so I'm just going to take that off. And the heat shrink will do the job that this was supposed to do and do it better. Alright, so there we go. I'm going to crimp that a little better there. Let's go ahead and solder that. Took a few tries, but finally got it stable where I can solder it. And see if we can get the old gun to work. Okay. Got the fan blowing over here, and I hope that's not too noisy. I don't know, but otherwise I couldn't make the video. It is 90, in the mid 90s here. The humidity outside is around 70 to 80%, and I can't stay out there in the heat in the afternoon very much. So I try to do the outside work in the morning before it heats up. Get some heat shrink here and get this thing insulated. Let's see what got some 4-to-1 marine with the glue inside of it. And I believe that's going to fit, but I should have put it on before I put the terminal on. Now I'm going to have to run it all the way from the far end. So remind me to put it on before I do the next one. But it just takes a few seconds here. We'll get it pulled through. And this wire here, it should handle QRO. I mean, this is 14 gauge, and it's more than sufficient. And that particular piece of heat shrink is not quite big enough. I thought it was. And let's see what the next size up is from this one. That's that one there, so this one back here should get it. Yep. So we'll put this one on. And this will just help protect against corrosion. I don't think we have to worry about it a whole lot since it's soldered. You know, with the solder being in there, it's not going to corrode between the wire and the terminal end there. All right, we got our heat gun, And you can use a match, you can use a lighter. This is, I already had it, so if I've got it, I'm going to use it. But I also, you know, I use matches a lot for this. You know, if I'm not near a heat gun, I'll use a match or a lighter to melt it, and it does just as well. So, like I say, this is a 4-to-1 shrink, so it shrinks to 1/4 of its original size, and that's a good connector. Need to get a piece of painter's tape, which I think I have here, and we'll mark this as to what band this is for. Okay, found the roll of painter's tape, and you use what you've got. Doesn't have to be this. I've also got a plastic label maker, but I think that's overkill, especially when we're starting out. Now, once I get the elements finalized, I may put that on there just to make it look good. But this is the 40-meter element. I'm going to write it on both sides so I can read it from either side. So we've got the 40-meter element cut, and we'll do the same thing for 20 meters. 20 meters, we need 16 feet, 5 and 5/8 inches, okay? I think we have enough of this one. We're not going to have a whole lot of elements out of this one. Then I'll have to go to the blue wire I've got over here. There's 5. 10. 15. And we need 16. So there's 16. And it says 5 and 5/8. I'm gonna do about 7 1/2. And I'm not gonna blame any of this on him, because I'm not following his instructions to the letter, because I'm not building exactly what he has. And his works. And if I have a problem with this, it's all on me. I'm not blaming anybody else. It's because I didn't think something through right, or didn't measure something right. But all right, we're going to get the heat shrink this time. Put it on here. Get the terminal. I'm going to go ahead and cut off this yellow, because it's just going to get in the way. That's why I should have my glasses on. All right. Got stripped off a little bit too much wire there. I'm going to trim that back, get it out of the way. All right. Now, I'm going to get this one soldered. Wants to fight me a little bit for some reason. Get a little solder on it there just to get the heat flowing, and then apply the solder to the opposite end. That way it'll draw the solder in to the joint, and we'll get a good electrical connection there. Okay, so that's crimped and soldered, and now we're ready to put the heat shrink on there. Run it out to the end. And shrink it on. All right. So that's the second one there. This is for 20 meters. Meters, 20 meters. All right. We'll go through and do the rest. It's just going to be, you know, lather, rinse, repeat. We're going to be doing the same thing over and over. I'm going to cut them to length. I'm going to cut one for 17, 15, 12, and 10, and we should be good. When I come back, we'll be ready to install these on the antenna itself. Okay, this is the end of part 2 of the build for the clone of the DX Commander. Stay tuned for part 3. Will be coming up next week. Hope you tune in. Hope you have a blessed day.